Hey everyone, welcome to 3 Beers Deep for, let's see, I'm recording this on Thursday, so 8, 9, 10, 11, May 11th, 2015. I almost said 2014. The days are all blurring together, the weeks are blurring together, the months are blurring together. 3 Beers Deep is my weekly Q&A show in which you submit questions to patrickklubbeck.tumblr.com and I think about answering them. I've pulled a selection of them out of the Tumblr hat, and let's get right to it. But wait, before we get to your questions, I really... So I published an article on Kotaku late last week called Konami Sucks. It is probably the most forceful headline I have written since joining Kotaku, and the reason that I wrote Konami Sucks is because ever since everything's been happening with PT, in which Konami announced they were no longer going to make Silent Hills, that they're breaking up with Hideo Kojima, or at least that seems to be the case, none of that stuff really bothers me. I don't really care what Hideo Kojima's relationship with Konami is. I don't really care that Konami is having a spat with one of their big designers. I don't even care that much that Silent Hills have been canceled. What I care about is the fact that in the age of digital distribution, agency has been taken away from the consumer. I hate the fact that Konami has taken down PT, one of the best horror games ever made, certainly one of the scariest things you can play right now on your PlayStation 4, assuming you already downloaded before they took it down. They chose to take it down. We don't know if there were reasons behind that. There could be valid reasons behind it, but they have chosen silence. They have chosen the worst possible scenario, and thus we are only left to wonder, is the reason they're doing it because they're spiteful and trying to bury gaming history? And that really touches a nerve with me. The video game industry is terrible at preserving its history. It's terrible at remembering where it came from. It's terrible about letting people who haven't played older games experience them in a new form. Just notice that with every new game console, more often than not, we lose backwards compatibility. And even if we do get the rare chance to pay for a game we already paid for before, it's often not every game. It's maybe not the game that we cherish. It's maybe not the game that we would want to pay for. And so we are forced into the gray areas of the world, piracy, and forced to have fans, bless their hearts, figure it out for corporations with millions of dollars and seemingly endless resources that they won't do the simple act of preserving the things that we enjoy and helped get them there into the first place. Their acts of creation that we have loved, that we have cared for, that we have paid for, are simply thrown into the dustbin in a way that is extremely aggravating. So with PT, they decided not only are we going to take it down from the store, but if you've already quote-unquote purchased it or you've downloaded it, if you delete it, if your hard drive's corrupted, there is no way to re-download it. What's happened in the past is that games that were taken down from stores, and this happens for legitimate reasons, right? So for example, there have been games that have been taken down from Xbox Live Arcade and PSN in which the company that published them lost the rights, and so they no longer can profit from the sales of those games. But a key difference is that you can still download those games. They still honor your right to having purchased of those games, and if you delete those games or some reason you have to get a new machine, you still have the right to download them. You don't have the right to purchase them because that company no longer has the right to sell them to you. So while that's complicated and weird and sort of an unfortunate byproduct of the digital era in which there is not a disc or a cartridge to pass around, at least there's a reason there. At least there's something you can grapple with. In this case, it feels vindictive. It feels as though they are burying a game they want nothing to do with anymore. And if it was something crappy, I guess I could understand, but PT is a revelation. It's fantastic, it's scary, it's terrifying. The first 30 minutes are some of the best gaming experiences I've had in the last 10 years, and it breaks my heart to see it go away, not only in a fashion that just gets rid of it, but in a fashion that means that millions of people will never get to experience it. If there's a reason that PT doesn't exist on the PlayStation Network store, I'd love to hear it. At least then I could wrap my head around it. But what's absurd, what led me to write something like Konami Sucks and feel good about it, even though that kind of goes against the sort of hyperbolic headlines I'm used to in the past, is because that's what I feel in my gut. I feel that Konami sucks, and I feel they're doing a disservice to something that was great. I have no idea if Silent Hills was going to be a good game, but I know that PT was an amazing experience, and it breaks my heart that more people aren't going to experience it. Whew. Konami sucks. Anyway, let's get to your questions. Let's pull them up. More airships, please. Great username. Question for 3 Beers Deep. How the hell are you doing, Patrick? He wrote this in caps, which I feel like encapsulates. All the rage I'm feeling about the pun I just made and all of the rage I just exhumed about PT. Because, So otherwise, I'm doing great. I'm recording this. I'm headed up to a family lake house in Wisconsin for a couple of days to relax, hang out with my brother, and drink some beers. I'll be away from my PC, which means no streams this weekend, at least unless I'm able to get back in time on Sunday afternoon. I'd love to do a couple of hours of Dark Souls 2, but we'll just see how quickly I'm able to get to my PC and fire things up. I also wish I'd be playing more Wolfenstein, The Old Blood, but that's not going to happen. So I'm great, but I'm also sad that I'm not going to be playing some of the games that I want to play in the days to come. Anonymous asks, have you played Uncanny Valley yet? If so, what are your thoughts, and do you plan on making any videos for it? Uncanny Valley is a 2D pixel horror game that I've had a code for a little while, but I've not had a chance to play it yet. Vinny Caravella, my former colleague at Giant Bomb, actually pinged me about it and asked, hey, have you played this game yet? It seems weird. And if Vinny is asking me if I've played it, I probably need to check it out. So look for something on that on my YouTube channel sometime next week, but nothing to report just yet. Sam Sarah 3. Dude, you're crafting sentences and opinions like you're running for office. I actually mean that in a good way. Have you considered getting political in any literal sense? He's responding to a short statement I made on my Tumblr account discussing some of the controversy facing Cards Against Humanity, a very strongly worded criticism review of Cards Against Humanity went up at Shut Up and Sit Down, a excellent board game focused website and podcast, I think, too. And yeah, I just basically, pointed out that I think Cards has had some problems in the past, and some of the cards absolutely punch down instead of up. And I still think there is a magic to the way that game allows people to tell jokes without necessarily knowing how to tell jokes. And I guess what he's trying to say is that I'm very diplomatic, but I don't know. I mean, I think that's like something that you have to learn when you become of a certain prominence on the internet, is that you have to try and find ways to be very articulate and deliberate and specific about what you say and not be sloppy in that regard, which I guess is often what happens in politics. But I hope that what I do is not what happens in politics is that often people say a lot of things without actually saying anything. They spend a lot of words sounding nice without actually having any substance. So I hope that's not what I'm doing, and I hope I would get called out if it sounds like I'm trying to placate too many audiences and at the same time end up not saying anything at all, because that would be a tragedy. Anonymous asks, "Fuck Udum, you asshole bigot." Okay, sure, yep. Great question. Anonymous asks, "Hey, you ever ball too hard?" Okay. In college, right around the time that I was getting ready to graduate, I went out with my friends. We had a little bit too much to drink, and I don't know quite what happened next. I know it involved a pile of bricks, but I broke several of my fingers, and I still to this day don't know how I broke them, because I picked up the brick and I thought I put it down, but apparently I didn't. My dog is barking. I'm going to tell my dog to stop barking. Go lay down. Tell my dog to go lay down. And she did. Good dog. Good dog. Still wish I don't know what happened to my fingers. They healed just fine, though. And they got me out of a final that I had to write with a pen and paper. Instead, I was able to type it on a computer. My finger was already well healed at that point, but I just claimed it wasn't. And then they let me have a laptop, and I felt kind of bad about it because everyone else in the class had to write a 6-page essay with a pen and paper, and I did it on a laptop, and I finished in 20 minutes. Ugh. I really hated that class, though. VG Rumbler. What do you think the chances of something similar to early access coming to either console are? It seems to be a very popular feature on Steam. I think it's not going to be a huge surprise if we see early access coming to the PlayStation 4 or Xbox One sometime in the next 2 years or so. My guess is before this console cycle is up, that is one of those features that will come to those machines. They'll be perhaps a little more explicit, or maybe there's some... I'm not sure exactly what the barriers are to that coming to consoles, but it strikes me as a natural progression for that to come to the PS4 and to the Xbox One. I believe Sony has actually outright said in the past that it sounded like an interesting idea, even if they hadn't actually made any progress on that front, or at least they haven't, sort of publicly made any progress on that front. But I think it is a fairly safe bet that comes to consoles at some point. And I think it's been, there have been plenty of games that have kind of crashed and burned on early access, and I think it's ultimately been a really healthy thing because people get to experience bad video games, or how bad video games are for such a long time until they're finished, and then suddenly they're pretty good. Or you get to experience games that kind of have just this one little magical thing that you can understand why those developers are making that game. And you as a player can see, oh, I see what they're doing here, and I can see how this could become something incredible, even if right now all you're holding on to is this little nugget of a thing. So I think early access has been tremendously useful for all sorts of respects, both for consumers and also for developers, giving them a new revenue model in a way that they can fund development on something that they can't raise capital for or don't want to go into crowdfunding. Necessarily, but they go early access and it works out for them. So I think it's great. I think early access I know why it's irritating to a lot of people, and it certainly made the Steam storefront pretty packed, but I think it is a net gain overall for what it allows for all sides of the equation. Shadow Skill 1-1, is it just me, or does Activision's Call of Duty Black Ops 3 seem like a conceptual ripoff of Deus Ex? It was actually pretty funny because Deus Ex, some of the Deus Ex developers were kind of poking fun at the Call of Duty developers for having what seemed like some very Deus Ex elements. But I mean, augmented humans was not invented by Deus Ex. Like, even if maybe some of the aesthetic is similar, like Deus Ex is ostensibly a semi-open world action adventure game in which you choose whether you are actiony, shooty, or stealthy, right? I guess if we're to drill down what Deus Ex is, it's like about player choice and how they engage situations. And Call of Duty is just going to be about giving you cool powers that let you use cool powers that humans normally can't use. Like, it's still going to be a shooty game. I mean, unless they significantly change it, that would shock me if there was anything more than just go forward and shoot the dudes. Except now you can like do weird stuff with your body to make the fights a little more interesting, or a little different than what they've been at before. I also thought it was funny that what's his face, the guy from behind District 9, he was also poking fun at the Call of Duty guys, being like, oh, you're ripping off District 9. I don't know, a lot of salt going around about that new Call of Duty. Things of this nature. When are you planning on playing System Shock 2? No plans right now, but I would like to play it eventually. If I play through any horror game in the near future on stream, it would probably be Eternal Darkness. I really, really want to finish that game and say that I've played it, so I think that might be next on the docket. I'm not promising when that'll happen. I've got plenty of going on right now, but I would like to play Eternal Darkness. Anonymous says, sometimes you'll talk about looking into a story and wondering whether or not you'll actually turn it into a feature. I was wondering how that process works. If you spend a certain amount of time looking into something, do you feel obligated to write about it even if you don't get everything you wanted? It seems like a tough thing to approach time-wise. Yeah, it's absolutely frustrating to spend, let's say, a full day researching a story only to have it fall apart from under you at the last second. It absolutely happens. It hasn't happened to me recently. I think what's actually ultimately like more frustrating than a story completely falling apart is looking into a story and then it's just way less interesting than you thought, or with the first thread that you pulled upon sounded fascinating, but then the real story is way different than that. So the opposite of that is a story I'm looking into now that I don't want to go into because I don't want someone to steal the story I'm looking into. But someone emailed me a tip that was about like, hey, you should check out this video that it's kind of a video series someone was doing. They're playing a game a certain way and it's really challenging. I was like, oh, that's fascinating, and the challenge they put themselves up to was already fascinating enough. But then when I started looking into why they did the challenge and the history of this person, it's just unbelievable. And so that's the best part when you look into a story, is that it's actually 10 times more fascinating than you would have thought. This was going to be a post that I just kind of threw up on Kotaku and said, look how interesting it is how this person played this game in a really hard way. And now I can potentially write a story that is not only that, but here's why this person is interesting. Here's something tragic behind the reason they're doing this challenge that informs why it's so interesting. And so hopefully that comes together. It's possible that I'm teasing a story that doesn't actually happen. That could be the case as well. Maybe that person doesn't get back to me. And then I have to go on hearsay and Facebook and Twitter and things like that just to try and piece together. And it's way less interesting than a person explaining it to me. But it absolutely happens. It is absolutely frustrating. But, you just kind of got to roll with it because that's part of researching a story, is that it's going to take twists and turns you might not expect, and it's also possible those twists and turns will kill your story in the process. All right, let's take one more question. Anonymous asks, I know you're a big horror fan, and I'm curious if you've ever checked out any of the newer, more intense haunted house experiences that have cropped up in the past few years in New York, LA, or Chicago. Things like Blackout or The Alone experience, where you have to go through by yourself and can be grabbed, or Delusion, which is a haunted play theater experience put on by a pro Hollywood stuntman. If not, would you ever be interested, or does the idea go too far for you? It's funny that you bring that up, because I think for 2 years now, my wife and I have played with the idea of going to one of these more extreme haunted houses. There was a haunted house series in New York that was coming to Chicago, and I was sitting at the ticket page thinking about picking out a date, and I looked up exactly what happens on these types of extreme haunted houses. Well, I want to know what extreme meant, right? And they change it every single time, so it's not really a spoiler. You're more just getting a sort of general sense of how far do these people go, what does it mean? Because you have to sign a piece of paper, sort of like allowing people to touch you and grab you and throw you, and it's all ultimately safe, but they're allowed to interact with you on a level that is much more intense than your average haunted house. And some of the stuff I read about, like there was an instance in which a bag is put on your head, you are strapped to a table, and the sounds of a chainsaw come all over your body. There was another instance in which a woman takes you, puts a plastic bag over your head, and then tries to make out with you through the plastic bag, like tongue into your mouth through the plastic bag, and everything. The one I was looking at had a kind of a sexual twinge to it, I would say, is kind of how it was described, as a way of making people feel a little more uncomfortable. Not to say that I won't do it, but it gave me pause long enough that maybe that was just too far. Maybe I like haunted houses, I like roller coasters, I like all that stuff, but the actual someone touching me and throwing me around maybe was just a little bit too far. But I would like to do it. I think I am just pussyfooting around it in a way that is ridiculous, and but it's easy for me to say, oh, I'll just do it this year because it's May and it's not October, and I have plenty of time to not do it again later this year. But we'll see. I'd be curious if you've had experience with it. Anyone that's listening to this or watching this on YouTube, please let me know. What was your experience like? Did you enjoy it? Was it too much? I think this October, my wife and I are planning to travel a little bit in October to experience some haunted houses and haunted experiences in other parts of the United States. So if you have recommendations, let me know. It's a little early, but I'll have to book flights sooner rather than later. But that does it for 3 Beers Deep. You want to listen to the audio version of this? Hey, there's a podcast as well. It's under my inventory management feed, which is a catch-all feed for all sorts of podcast stuff that I do. You can get that on iTunes under inventory management. If you go to inventorymanagement.simplecast.fm, you can stream the episodes, download the episodes, and there's an RSS link that you can drop into your favorite podcast app to listen to it on any phone or application that you like. If you have questions, go to patrickklebick.tumblr.com. And I know I've been teasing doing a more proper gaming podcast in the future, and things are coming together. We're looking at hopefully doing a test podcast next week. We'll see. We're trying to get everyone's schedules lined up, figure out how we want to structure things, and maybe we'll do it and it's terrible and we don't actually want to continue with it. But hopefully I'll have more to report soon. If not, well, I don't know what if not, but in any case, I'll see you guys next week.